This bag is so tough, bro. Oh my God, the whole intro was for me to show you this bag. I got this bag for my recent vacation that I took with my beautiful girlfriend to Italy. A part of that trip was spent in Rome, where we decided to check out the Pantheon. As I had sat down on one of the plastic chairs that they set around on the floor of the building, an older guy asked if he could sit next to me. I obviously said, fuck no, just kidding. I said yes. And as my yapping ass always likes to do, I started a conversation with bro. The guy was super cool. I'm not gonna get into the specifics of what we talked about, but he was like 80 years old and he spent his entire life traveling, and as I was talking to this guy, I was just astonished by all the wisdom and knowledge he seemed to carry. It was refreshing and enjoyable having a conversation with this guy. Not gonna lie, I got a little bit scared when he said he was an American, 80-year-old white guy from America. I was like, but he didn't fuck with Trump, so we're cool. Then his wife found us. She sat next to him. The conversation kind of geared towards their relationship. These guys have traveled so much together. They were together for what? I think like 40, 50 years? And somewhere along that conversation, the guy mentions that, oh yeah, don't think we're rich or anything. We have only been able to travel so much because we just, never decided to have kids. And at this point in the conversation, I don't know if it was the 20,000 steps that I was hitting a day with the hot Italy sun, but I got pretty emotional when he said that. We're losing something great when this guy inevitably dies. All the wisdom and worldview and perspective and insight that he had is just going to be gone with no lineage to pass that on to. This then led me down a spiral of thinking throughout my entire trip about all the different layers of people not wanting to have kids. Do I think it's morally wrong for someone to not want to have kids? No, I think that's a very complicated topic. It's kind of paradoxical that I praise this guy for being so well-rounded and having so much wisdom, but who knows if he would have ever gotten to be the man who he is if he didn't spend a lot of his life traveling. And instead, he chose to settle down and start a family. I'm tapped into world affairs, and if you know anything about trends in the world, a lot of developed countries are having negative birth rates, meaning that we're having less kids than it would take for us to replace the current number of people we have, so the population is slowly but surely going down. Where I'm from, Canada is a part of a couple of countries that are facing this problem. And that's kind of interesting, isn't it? We are part of a group of some of the most advanced and developed countries, but the next step for a lot of people is just to stop it here and not move on. Am I crazy, or does that not paint a nihilist picture of the whole entire world? Why aren't we leaving it in more? Why aren't we cream pieing with intention anymore? The fact that we're having this debate in this way is something that's very brand new to us. For most of human history, not having kids wasn't really a philosophical choice, it was a tragedy. There's a list of things that have changed that made I'm gonna choose not to have kids something that doesn't sound as crazy as it would back when we were, like primal fighting for our survival. But I wanna take a look at each of these reasons and to see which one of them are valid and which other ones that I think are a nihilistic response to the state of the world. And I want to give my opinion on why I don't think wanting to quiet quit the species is an appropriate response to the end of the world. Let's start off with the For this section of the video, I wanted to boil down the reasons that people don't want to have kids or choose not to have kids into two main sections. One being the micro, otherwise known as everyone's interpersonal reasons for not having kids on the individual scale, and the macro, the big existential fate of the world reasons that people don't want to have kids. I think I want to talk about the micro scale issues because those are the ones that I honestly don't have much to say because I think that they're pretty valid. They open the biggest rifts in my argument. Having kids is an immense burden. Time, money, the two ways you can spend those now all revolve around the kid that you brought into this world. Any future savings that you have are all oriented around, okay, how do I, prop up this kid's future so that it's successful or that I give them a head start. Now, what does this mean? It means a couple of things. One, you've had to have set yourself up, hopefully, in a position where you have a good amount of income and time to give to a kid, but you should also have the mental fortitude to be able to handle a kid. If any of those, three pillars aren't there, raising a kid goes from being really hard to impossible. So if someone's honestly saying that they don't feel like they meet any of those three columns, I can't really blame them for putting off wanting a kid or choosing not to have a kid. Also, Life is short. People want to spend this finite amount of time we have in different ways, and some people might call that selfish, which I think it is selfish, but just because something's selfish doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. I actually think a good level of selfishness is healthy. You call someone selfish, oh my God, that's such a bad thing. You say someone's putting themselves first, oh, that's such a great thing. It's semantics. This wanting to enjoy yourself argument is something that I think I would have disagreed with more, because I naively kind of think that, you know, what if you live 80 years, which is like the common life expectancy, are you really going to fill in all that time with just other shit? But the guy in the Pantheon is the perfect example as to, yeah, you can. He's given up a life of fatherhood for a life of exploration and being an adventurer, and who am I to fucking say that he lived his life wrong? Like, are you kidding me? Get out of here. Moving the conversation onto someone like his wife, she has an opportunity to live life in a way that's completely different than the hundreds of years of patriarchy that followed before her. Women are finally allowed to make the choice of if they want to sacrifice so much of their life towards wanting to have kids, and it is a sacrifice. This level of freedom has given a lot of women the ability to self-actualize, otherwise known as getting on the top of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, in ways that simply weren't there under the typical patriarchal structure. I mean, I think about my mom all the time, man. Like, she had my sister and me at a really young age, and then she immigrated to Canada. So amongst acclimating to the culture here, learning English and raising us two, she never really had that much time for self-discovery. And I think back to myself like, wow, who would my mom be if she, you know, didn't have me? That was a huge sacrifice that I'm very grateful that she made, but I completely understand why some people don't want to do that. Now, those are all the reasons I think, you know, not wanting to have a kid makes sense. Now, I think if you were to make an argument for as to why people choose not to have kids with any of the things I pointed out, you can make really compelling arguments. I think it really is a case-by-case basis on the journey of getting to a spot where you have the financial capacity and the mental capacity and the understanding of yourself to where you feel like you can spend the rest of your life being in service of starting someone else's. All that shit requires like a billion layers of complexity and depth that if I were to give an overall statement of, oh, these are good reasons and these are bad reasons, I would just be bulldozering the complexity that comes with wanting to have a kid or choosing to have a kid on the individual scale by just generalizing everything. Something I will comment and critique on, though, is how a lot of these factors that are on the individual scale are, in my opinion, a direct result of the effects of not people's personal choices per se, but just a reaction to the environment that they're in. The narratives would change if the burden of finances wasn't as big of a problem, if setting up a comfortable safety net for your kid didn't mean committing financial suicide at the same time. The narrative would change if we had a more community-oriented society to where you could bleed some of the responsibilities of raising your kid to your neighbors or your friends. I mean, they do say it takes a village to raise a kid. But what if you don't have that village? Then a lot less people are going to be raising kids. It's no coincidence that in the societies where we are choosing to have less kids, we're also having less sex, less personal connections, less friends. There's loneliness epidemics happening. Although I do believe that the micro scale of reasons people choose not to have kids is a bit too complex to talk about in generalizations, I think the macro scale is where we can make more definite statements. And those things that I'm about to argue in the macro scale directly impact people when they make decisions on the micro scale. American philosopher Jaden Smith one time famously said, why don't we talk about the political and economic state of the world right now? Which he then famously ducked when it actually happened.
Jaden, can I get a free Palestine, Jaden?
On a real note, though, the macro scale is basically the political and economic state of the world. Things happening that are just bigger than one person. And the things that happen on this scale kind of dictate how we look at the future and our place in the future, and in this conversation, most importantly, our kids' place in the future. Now, what are these political and economic state of the world things that people take a look at when thinking about their future? Well, there's systematic racism, the patriarchy, the world stage being fucked up with genocide, late stage capitalism, and as a direct result of that, mass climate change. All these things are real. And at first, I wouldn't blame anyone for coming to the logical conclusion that, hey, these things suck. I have to face them. And I know they suck because I face these issues every single day. These issues are seemingly getting worse. So why would I want to bring someone in this world to also face these issues that are becoming worse? In doing my research for this video, I stumbled upon the name for what this philosophical thought is called, and that is antinatalism. Antinatalism is the philosophical stance that bringing new life into the world is morally wrong. The ancient origins of antinatalism traces back thousands of years. It appears in early surviving formulations from ancient Greece, such as in the play Oedipus at Colonus by, I can't fucking say this, so sorry, Sophocles around 406 BC. In the 19th and 20th century philosophy, however, thinkers like Arthur Schopenhauer, the Norwegian philosopher Peter Wessel Zapf, and German thinkers at the turn of the 20th century explored philosophical pessimism and the refusal of the will to live, laying the groundwork for modern antinatalism. Basically, the thought process behind antinatalism is that it is inherently morally wrong to bring life into this world because that is retroactively signing up that life for suffering. And the life that you're bringing in never really got to the ability to consent to all that suffering, which kind of makes sense when you first think about it. How is someone supposed to not only face the disaster that feels like the current world we're living in, let alone bring a new life into what is considered by many to be the end times? Why would you even want to subject someone to that level of pain and suffering? Well, I'll give you my opinion in a bit. But before that, quick sidebar into this segment that I like to call When People Should Not Have Kids. This entire video is about people who might want to have kids but choose not to. I am going to do this quick sidebar about people who want to have kids but really shouldn't. So if you watch this segment and you thought or have said any of these lines, bro, please pull out. You should not have a kid if you think it's going to fix your relationship. You should not have a kid if you're just bored. You should not have a kid if you think, I need friends. On top of that, you should not have a kid just to have a vessel for emotional support that you can dump on. Go buy a plushie. Don't have a kid if you haven't done anything in your life and you need one thing to be your sense of accomplishment. And my last thing is, don't have a kid if you have dreams and aspirations that you could never achieve, so you're going to put it on your kid. Anyways, that's my quick little spiel. If you're liking this video so far, please consider liking, subscribing, and commenting. Follow me on all my social medias at Ali has a cool username. Thank you very much. Now back to the climax of this video. I get where the headspace comes when you look at the world and you're thinking it's a horrible place. Why would I want anyone else to suffer how much I've suffered? But I still don't think quite quitting society and humanity is the right answer. I think if you choose not to have a kid because of existential reasons like being an antinatalist or saying, oh, the world is ending and I don't want a kid to be a part of that, I understand you, but I think there's a couple of flaws in that argument. First off, I should also say, dude, I know I'm a 23-year-old guy. If everything goes right in my life, I want to have a kid like at least a decade from now, right? So I understand that I have a young person's perspective on this and I'm not really faced with that question right now. Also, I'm a guy, so I'm not the one pushing the kid out of my vagina. Bear in mind, this is my perspective as just someone who's taking like a general philosophical take on the entire thing. My first argument against all this is, one, the notion that things are as bad as they've ever been. Don't get me wrong, things are horrible right now, but if you pick up a history book, you can see that this is far from the truth. We have very unique problems facing humanity right now. Late-stage capitalism affecting our climate, bringing on horrors in the world in the forms of AI, and although this is a unique horror for us, I would argue it's still not necessarily the worst ever time to be alive. I've listed a lot of the negatives that have come out of human development, but there have been an immense amount of positives. We have never been more scientifically advanced. We've never understood the world more with medicine and healing. You got a cold back in the medieval times, you're cooked, buddy. As I'm recording this video, there's war and genocide happening, but we've had war and genocide happen before in human history a lot of times. And that's not to downplay what's currently happening right now, but it's to say that those ended, meaning that this atrocity that we're currently facing can also end. A thing about all these problems that we're facing is that they're man-made problems, meaning we created them. And I think a lot of people forget that the inverse of that equation is that we can get ourselves out of this situation. It's not a meteor hitting the earth. There are things that we made so we can dismantle them. I'm not trying to whitewash the atrocities of the world or to say that, oh, if we all get together and sing about it, hallelujah, we can fix it. I know it's much harder said than done, but look at all the fascists and imperialists that have existed in history thus far. All of them that were seemingly untouchable at the time have gotten toppled. We as humans have gone down bad paths and have been able to take steps back and course correct along the way. That can't happen forever. If we just let bad shit happen constantly, there's going to be a point of no return. But we don't have to get there. Sure, having a kid would make it so that they don't have to face the trials and tribulations of today, but it also means that they can't have an impact on the betterment of tomorrow. In pop culture and media, time travel is a theme that people like to play with where, oh, you go back in time to correct the future or the present. And in all those pop culture films that talk about time travel, what do they say? They say, don't change anything about the past because even the slightest of changes can have drastic consequences for the future. And that's a notion everyone agrees on. But it's crazy how we don't take that same logical path and apply it to today. And we don't think that our small actions of today can have a butterfly effect and lead to crazy changes in the future. Dude, I mean, look at Palestine. My father would tell me that like 10, 20 years ago, the word Palestine was treated like Voldemort in the Harry Potter universe where you can't even mention it or utter it. And now the city I live in, Mississauga, flew the Palestinian flag. Support to the genocidal state of Israel is at an all-time low. Obviously, things aren't fully better, but the overall attitude that people have today in the zeitgeist is what people were dreaming of years ago. And although there's still a lot of work to do, you'd be crazy to deny the progress that's being made today. This entire also anti-natalist, I don't want my future kid to suffer argument also falls flat for me because I don't think suffering is bad. Obviously, no one wants to intentionally suffer, but a life void of suffering and hardship is a life not worth living. If you have tried to strive for anything in this life, you have firsthand experience on knowing how much suffering and hardship comes with achieving anything that's worth achieving. Learning the piano, getting your degree, passing that class. But once you get to those points and once you achieve those goals, you get an immense sense of fulfillment, and it wouldn't feel as good if you didn't suffer to get there. Why do people stop playing the story mode in GTA after you beat the main mission? It's because they give you an unlimited amount of money for you to do anything. And next thing you know, no one wants to do that because there's no weight to the cars you can purchase or the houses you can buy because you can just get everything without really working for it anymore. The same philosophy is applicable to life and living. Not wanting to bring a life into this world because you're empathetic enough to not want it to suffer is inherently robbing that potential life of its ability to feel proud and accomplished and fulfilled, which are all things that lead people to a deeper sense of happiness. You're robbing a potential person's ability to feel happiness. I understand it can feel like we have no capacity to change anything. The entire video is not to make a judgment call on people or to say, oh, you're so bad for not wanting to have kids. Look, I get it, man. But I just want the world to be a better place than it was yesterday. I want it to be filled with people who have empathy, and it really disheartens me when I see people who share my worldview wanting to just leave without leaving a person here who shares that same beautiful view on life that they have. I've traveled a lot this year, and it's opened my eyes to how astonishing humankind has been. The species has an overwhelming amount of history and triumph and amazing things about it. But it's clear that the level of greed and evil that's in this world right now is leading the species to a extinction level event within the next couple generations. But let's not forget that we are the ones who put us here, and we just as easily can change that. To bring this conversation back to what really matters, this bag is so tough, bro. But on a real note, back to the guy in the Pantheon. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, oh, he's morally wrong or he's a pompous, privileged guy for not wanting to have kids. He didn't waste his life. He actually lived a very fulfilling life. He was one of the most alive people I've ever met. But here's where that emotion that I felt comes from. The reason I felt something when he told me he didn't want to have kids wasn't because I pitied him. It's because I recognized that curiosity that he carried, that wisdom, that love of life, his perspective, the way he saw the world, it stops with him. And I think that's a major loss, not for him, but for us. That's my video for this week. New video out next week. Like, subscribe. Thank you very much.